Hello, everybody, and good morning, and welcome to our panel on Great Beginnings, hooking your reader from the first page. And I would venture to say you really need to do it from the first paragraph and even from the first line, if that's possible. And our purpose here is to show you how to do that. Okay, so I think a good way to start would be for each of us to introduce ourselves. Let's take a minute or two each and just introduce ourselves to our audience. Let's start with Gary.
Hello, my name is Gary Chahot. Gerard is perfectly fine if you want to do the Americanized thing and not be pretentious like myself. Basically, I just completed my dissertation or my doctorate in European history. I am also an author, published a dozen short stories, and I published 2 novels with brain lag. In fact, my newest novel, The Afghan Wedding, which I'll show it off just because I'm so happy about how the cover turned out, because I think that not just hooking your audience from the first line, but often having the cover page can be a real thing to hook people in. It just came out this month, so I'm very happy about that. There's actually a reading for that in the next panel. I'm going to be reading the first chapter. So yeah, thank you very much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Okay, terrific. Stephen?
Oh, the dog is named Smooch, as somebody asked about him. I'm having to watch the dog. If he causes problems, I'll put him away, but he's usually bad, but we'll see.
Hello, Smooches. I'm Stephen B. Pearl. I have something like 13 novels out at the moment and more on the way. Two of my series are with brain lags, the Tinker's World series, Tinker's Plague, Tinker's Sea, and a short story in The Light Between Stars. And the Freedom Saga, Cloning Freedom, Freedom's Law, Freedoms of Myth, coming out this December. And the year December after that will be Arming Freedom, and the December after that should be Freedom's War. So that's kind of an annual thing for the next couple of years. I write primarily science fiction. I also write paranormal, and just a shout out to the importance of the first line. Your first line sells your first paragraph. Your first paragraph sells your first page. Your first page sells your first 10 pages. Your first 10 pages sell your book. And just to end that, your last line sells your next book.
Ooh,
so
that's a good one.
Good point.
So, this is really probably the most important part of writing a book for your sales.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. Natasha.
Hi, everyone. So my name's Natasha. I'm really happy to be here with you today. So a bit about myself. I'm a grad student. I'm starting my PhD in literature at the University of Texas at Austin this fall, finishing off my master's in comparative literature at the University of Ottawa. So I've published 1 book, a science fiction novel, Sims and Science. It's a mix of comedy, sci-fi, horror. So if you like that stuff, you can check it out. I also have a background in communications and journalism, which will be relevant for the discussion today, which is hooking your audience.
Okay, thank you. And I before I forget, I just want to remind everybody that there is a brain lag booth in the vendors area. So if any of our participants are physically present at the con, you can stop by. Please stop by and say hi to Catherine. She'll be very happy to see you.
Very approachable, nice person. So yeah, say hi to Catherine.
Oh yeah, definitely. And if you are virtual only, you can order any of our books online from Amazon or through your local bookstore. They're available in digital as well as print on demand. And some are on pre-order, and you can pre-order them as well. So, and that's the commercial. Now we get down to the business. I'm Arlene F. Marks. I am the creator of the Sic Transit Terra universe. That's a series of ongoing space opera adventure. 6 books so far. The 7th is in final edits. I've got 2 books out with Brain Lag. The first was Adventures in Godhood, which was released last year. Imaginary Friends is my story collection, and it came out in May this year. And I've got a paranormal murder mystery called Weekends Can Be Murder that's coming out in November this year, and is on pre-order. So, and I like Gary's comment about the cover, because this one really kind of says it all. So, okay, your opening line is very, very important. And I've got a few that I'm going to throw out there. A friend of mine gave me a mug with all kinds of opening lines from famous novels. And I'll just, shoot out a few of them over there. As Gregor Samsa awoke one morning from uneasy dreams, he found himself transformed in his bed into a monstrous vermin. You don't know about me without you have read a book by the name of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, but that ain't no matter. It was a pleasure to burn. Call me Ishmael. Happy families are all alike. Every unhappy family is unhappy in its own way. And it was a bright, cold day in April, and the clocks were striking 13. It's not important to know the titles of these books, but what's important is that every one of these was the opening to what became a classic. So what made these so successful? I think what I'll do is I'll direct the question to one panelist first, and then when that panelist has answered, I'll throw it out to everybody else on the panel. Okay, so Gary, how about you to start? What made all of these opening lines so effective?
So I think what is essential for an opening line is to set the tone of the novel. So you set the tone immediately by, just systematically, you can set it in a tense, whether you're going to use third or first person. Not only that, but you can present the emotional air of a novel. I think I was actually reading through first lines before we started, and I like Dickens. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, that whole opening paragraph, because it presents contradiction. It presents hope and despair at the same time. It's not just presenting the opening part of the story, the actual story structure, but it's giving you an emotion that you're going to carry through the first chapter, that you're really going to carry through the whole book. And it's setting that emotional tone, which is so important.
Okay, who'd like to run with this one now?
Yeah,
I'll take it. Oh, go ahead.
Oh,
Ladies
yeah,
first.
sure. Yeah, I was just gonna say, first of all, I find it so funny because I have the exact same mug with all the opening lines. Yeah, those are such great ones, like Kafka from Metamorphosis. It's just so weird that that it's going to be completely absurd and like defy all the norms of literature up until that point. And I love the Moby Dick opener, Call Me Ishmael. It's so short, it's 3 words, but it captures your imagination immediately. It's like Ishmael's from Abrahamic religions. I think he's a prophet in Islam, but it immediately tells you that this is going to be a story of biblical proportions. So they're really great. I think what's important is that it's about setting the tone and kind of giving the reader a hint of what this story is going to be all about, like whether that's 3 words or that amazing long paragraph from Dickens in The Tale of Two Cities. And it just kind of, it's a way of just telling your reader what they're getting themselves into by opening this page. And if they're hooked, well, they're going to read on, right?
Yeah. Stephen?
I think the most important thing about all the lines, they get you the reader asking questions. They don't really answer anything, but you're going, why? You know, call me Ishmael. Why does he want to be called Ishmael? Is that his name? What are the implications of this? Is it just a biblical name? Is it a throwaway, or is this something significant? I start the Freedom Saga with, this is not a good plan. Immediately, what's not a good plan? Somebody has a plan, it's not working out. And then you build on that. So yes, there's this thing of setting tone, but there's also the thing of just tweaking the reader's imagination and saying, okay, I want to read on to get the answer. And from that question, they get the answer to that, but that answer leads to 2 more questions, which leads to 2 more. And it's this exponential progression right at the start of the book. And probably by the end of chapter 1, you've got your world more or less established. But it all starts with that initial question. Go.
Well, I agree, and I just like to add that it's also a way to provide a point of view and to give voice to the point of view character. And by that, it helps to establish a setting, a time, and a place. And I'm thinking here of Huckleberry Finn, where you've got, you don't know me, but that don't matter. Again, it's important to draw the reader in. And Stephen, you're absolutely right that you have to get the reader wanting to know more. One of the best opening lines I ever read had to do with, I think it was, we were doing just fine until someone dug up one of the bodies.
Yeah.
And that just encapsulated the entire tone, and like, you know that you're going to be reading a comedy. Here's the opening line of Adventures in Godhood. The pigeon exploded on Detective Marty Breck's 5th floor window ledge at 7:08 on a Monday morning. And you know, this is going to be a very, very weird book. And that there's going to be a lot of comedy in it. Okay, so it is often said that the opening of a book or of a story can be the hardest part of the book to write. Why?
It's got to pull so much weight.
Yeah, Stephen, you want to elaborate on that?
Okay, well, basically in your opening, your reader has presumably seen your cover and read your back cover blurb. So that's drawn them in to that extent. Now they're making the decision whether they're going to buy the book, read the book, etc. And that hook, that opening, has to draw them in almost immediately, or else they're going to move on to the next thing on the shelf. So it has to pull a huge amount of weight. I always say, well, you always write the whole book and then you go back and edit the whole thing. But after you've edited the whole thing, you go back and you re-edit your opening line even more, because nowhere else in your book is the axiom, every word must pull weight. as heavily important. So it is, in total man hours you put into it, it's definitely the hardest part of writing, singular hardest part of writing the book. It's also the most fun because you really have to challenge yourself to get everything to fit. Okay, I'm going to use just the short one from one of my own works, Tinker's Plague. The boy sprinted along the crumbling asphalt road, his twisted left arm flailing in his haste. Immediately, it's action. And this is the other thing. Start with action or dialogue. Description is off-putting. It's completely counterintuitive, but you start with action or dialogue. But you've got action. You've got the question, why is the road crumbling? Why does he have a twisted left arm? And why is he running? So, you have to do that. You have to hook, and you have to set your world at the same time, because this is a post-apocalyptic world. And that's implied by the crumbling asphalt road, but it's not stated overtly yet. So you have to have all of that incorporated.
Now, is there any way to make it an easier process?
Well, I think one key theme that runs through so many of these great opening lines that we've looked at is you are getting the perspective of a character. Even if you're doing it in third person, you're getting how, okay, it's this character is running. Maybe they're afraid of something, there's something dire happening. You're getting an emotional sense, you can just imagine this person's pain. Whether, even if it's an omniscient narrator, you're still getting a feeling that a major character is going to have.
Okay.
Yeah. One
Let's
thing
talk
I
about
find,
Natasha.
yeah, one thing I find makes the writing process easier for your first line. I like to approach it a little bit like I would in journalism when you're writing your lead, is that in one line, you want to answer normally who, what, where, and why. And then with the novel, the only thing you leave pending maybe is why. So you want to try to find that same kind of all around attention grabbing one liner, but with a bit more suspense than you would in a news article. So I've always really approached it that way. I've been told my writing's journalistic, and it's definitely like it's something you get used to when you're in that line of business. You need to know how to write a punchy one liner that grabs people's attention. So I've really always tried to apply that logic to my books, not just in the opening line, but at the opening line of every single chapter, every single subsection. Just like, okay, we want another lead to keep them engaged.
Yeah. Another thing that can make it easier is to realize that your initial conflict, the conflict in your first chapter, doesn't have to be the central conflict of your book. As long as there is a conflict and that conflict logically leads into the world or some other aspect of the book, it doesn't have to be the central conflict. So you can take that off the table and do a custom-made conflict for that opening and use that as your grabber. Great example. I have what I like to call the James Bond formula. You look at the Bond films, they always start with Bond at the end of his last mission. You have the exciting climax of his last mission, then it dips down and starts into the new mission. And that way they get to have this rollicking great beginning. And then they can drop back a little bit and use the lull to let the audience desensitize so the future action actually has more impact.
Okay, so you're talking about in medias res is the term.
Okay.
Okay, when you jump into the middle of things. But is that absolutely necessary? Because there are a lot of really good books that have started with quieter scenes, is it necessary to have loud, rollicking action, or can you start off a little more subdued, shall we say?
It all depends what you like. Some people like that slow opening. I personally don't. I put down an award-winning book and never went back to it because the first 2 pages involved a bumblebee flying over a field of flowers.
Well, you don't know what that bumblebee was up to. Maybe it was, doing something very suspicious. So, and now you'll never know.
And I couldn't be bothered to know.
One thing I was going to say, just to go back a bit, is so I like your idea how you present a conflict. This is what we in the business would call a kick in the door style, is there's something exciting happening just from the start. And you said that, this doesn't have to be the main conflict. However, even though it doesn't have to be the main conflict, it can tie into the main themes of the book. And so
Definitely.
since we're all reading our first opening lines, and I hope we get to hear from yours, Natasha, but the opening line for my most recent book, The Afghan Wedding, is unseen tears stream down puffy cheeks beneath the 15-year-old's white veil. And so here you have this very dramatic opening, and in this case you have a young girl in Afghanistan who is betrothed. Clearly she's not happy, to a local warlord. Now, spoiler alert, this is not going to be the main conflict over the entire novel. I don't think this is a spoiler because you could kind of tell from the blurb. So, I didn't give everything away. You could still buy the novel. But in any case, it does tie into themes, though, which is here you have this person who is in a world that is beyond her control, and that she is having decisions made for her, and she is having to react to those. So thematically, this can tie into everything, even if the initial action isn't the main conflict of the novel.
Natasha, you wanted to say something.
Well, sure. I mean, you mentioned one of my openers. I can read you the opener from mine. It's simple, straightforward. It's Dalton McGovern could no longer bear the weight of it all. So, you can see my journalistic practices a little bit in there. You have who, you have the main character already. What? Well, he can't bear the weight of it all. There's a bit of suspense there. So, it's very straightforward, but it definitely leaves it's open-ended. You want to know the weight of what, who is this guy? So, I definitely, it's not like it's the central point of the plot, but it is a little bit what's gonna, it's what's gonna set everything in motion. So I personally like writing in a very active way like that. Not much of a bumblebee going through the but everyone. When a lot of writers get criticized for being expository in their intros, like trying to say too much in the beginning, but some of them do it so masterfully, like Dickens. So it really depends. But yeah.
So if I can just sum up what we've been talking about, the opening scene, whether or not it contains physical activity, should introduce a main character, a point of view, establish the setting somehow. You can provide significant background information, create suspense by raising questions in the reader's mind, foreshadow a future event. As long as it does something important, because every scene of a story needs to fulfill a purpose. And when we're going through the editing process, one of the things we're doing is we're asking ourselves, does this scene have to be here? What purpose does it serve? And if it doesn't really serve a purpose, but we just kind of thought it was fun, it has to come out. And that's for the sake of pacing in the middle of the book, but also for the sake of grabbing the reader's attention at the beginning. One of the things that I always used to hate as a reader was the teaser that never delivered. So, you know, writing a humorous opening scene for a story that's really a tragedy, it feels like you've been betrayed as a reader. You're not likely to pick up another book by that author again. So that's another thing to mention. Okay, so getting some of these have been mentioned already. What are the tropes that will weaken a story's opening, and how can they be stood on their heads? And for the benefit of our audience who may not be familiar with the term, a trope is a storytelling device that has been used sufficiently often to become commonplace or predictable. It's not exactly a cliche. It hasn't reached that depth yet, but it's getting there, definitely. Like the saloon girl with the heart of gold in a Western, that kind of thing. So that's a trope. And what are some of the tropes that can weaken the introduction of a story?
Well, I have a feeling we probably have a few fantasy authors out there, and what I would say is, don't just copy Tolkien, because you cannot pick up a fantasy novel nowadays. You know, at least half of them, you open it up and it feels like, okay, this is right in Middle Earth's backyard. So you need to give your own special edge to it. You know, do not start with an elf. You know, it might even be an elf, but call it something different. You know, give me something new. I love elves, but you know what? There's too many friggin' elves. I think even one of the Inklings said that you know, are we, pardon my language, but literally I think one of them, Tolkien brought in an early version of the Lord of the Rings, and I think someone said, "Oh my God, not another fucking elf." So there you go. It was old even in his time.
Okay, and my contribution is going to be this: do not have your character on a train, plane, or in a car going somewhere.
Oh yeah. Don't start sitting down.
It's been done to death, and it's a close relative to waking up from a bad dream, which is also a trope that could sink your battleship right off the mark. So now the way to stand that on its head is to have your character in an airplane, noticing that the engines aren't sounding right, or on a plane suddenly remembering that they left their medication in a locker in the airport. And the reason for that is you are now creating some suspense. You are creating a question in the reader's mind. How is this going to get resolved? What's going to happen next? Because what's going to happen next is probably the most important question that you can have a reader asking themselves.
So one thing I will say very quick, just to get my thought out, is I saw you had your hand up, Natasha, but I beat you to it. But one thing is that we're giving you a lot of great rules today and a lot of things which you can jot down and really help you out. But there are ways you can cheat. I think that if you are a good enough author, and even you don't have to be a genius, but maybe you just have a good idea. There are ways that you can break through this and present something which maybe is not as follows all those rules, but is still exciting. So one example is one thing that we talk about is you want to have action. You want to start with something that's not an exposition dump, that sort of thing. But you can sneak that in if you are smart enough. if you have a unique sort of twist. So for example, if you started off your novel with something like when the aliens attacked the world went to hell or something like that, this happened here, that might be boring if you're just telling people what had happened before the novel actually happens. You really don't want to do that. You want to start in the present. Don't start your novel by setting up what's going to happen, just jump right into it. But what you can do is, say, for example, you started out with something like, and then our hero looked at the half-destroyed monument and read on the faded plaque, all honor and glory to those who died defending our planet from the invaders. You're basically you're giving the same information, but now you're setting a tone, you're jumping us right into the action. Obviously someone is reading it, they're getting perspective of a character, why is this person in this sort of dystopian area? So if you can bring a little creativity to it, you can sort of buck these tropes and make your opening novel even much more interesting.
Showing rather than telling.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think you had your hand up, Natasha.
Natasha.
Did I steal your thunder?
That's all good. One trope I find writers need to be very careful of using is writing about writers or writing about people in writerly professions. It's
Stephen King.
I mean, Stephen King, he's Stephen King, so he can do it. But your average, and even at that, it's like, okay, every single time they're all writers. But yeah, it's so overdone, and you're not writing only for other writers. You're writing for all kinds of people. Like, they're not all going to relate to what it's like to be a writer. So it's so easy for the writing process is something so introverted, something so isolating, that it's easy to kind of wind up in your own little bubble. And then of course it makes sense to write about a writer, but your average person won't know about that. So try to think externally, look beyond your writer life and write about other kinds of people. They're very interesting, probably more interesting than the people sitting at their computers all day writing. So avoid writing about writers or people in writing professions. Like every chick flick, the girl always works in publishing or in journalism. Like, it's not necessary.
The Lois Lane syndrome.
Stephen, do you want to comment?
Well, honestly, I agree with the idea that avoid tropes unless you bring something new to it, because then it's not a trope anymore. I mean, okay, your personal one of people going somewhere in a car, I'll agree 100% it's been overdone. But the car skidded on the rain-slicked road heading towards the safety barrier, then crashed through and tumbled down the slope into the stream beneath. Okay, you've just taken that trope of, yeah, they're going somewhere in a car, obviously. Forget it. This is what's happening. So, you can use a trope if you stand it on its head, but you have to do that. So I'm agreeing with everything that everybody else has said.
It's a good place to be. Just nod whenever I say something,
Okay, we have a question from Cricket. Going out on a limb here, can we submit a first line if we have one? Absolutely. Who's got a first line that they'd like to run past?
Yes, are there people who are actually willing and brave enough to submit their first lines for criticism and critique to our
learned panel?
Yeah.
Warning, I'm mean.
All right, I can read the first one.
Okay.
Rain pelted my long black and red dreadlocks as I leaned against the alley's brick wall watching the dim-eyed souls shuffling about.
There's a lot of strong imagery right there. I can see your opening line. It's really nice.
Yeah. And it does raise questions. Dim-eyed
Yeah.
souls shuffling about.
And also, why are they standing out in the rain?
Hmm.
Uh,
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, that's a very powerful opening sentence, Cricket. You've got a good one there.
Dark and it's eerie. I really like it.
yeah, it's good.
See,
And
that wasn't,
As
wasn't
long
too
as it
painful.
ties into what follows, it's good.
I like the use of black and red. It's like, because it's such a dark scene that you've painted, the red really stands out. That's pretty cool.
and it doesn't use the verb to be.
I think maybe just switching it up just a little bit, because you're putting the rain is the action. So the rain, rain pelted. I think instead of you open it up with something like, I watched the dim-eyed souls shuffling about, and maybe said where, as the rain pelted my dreadlock. So that way the focus is on the character rather than maybe the scene.
Well, the beginning and the end of a sentence are two places of significance, of emphasis. So you have to decide what's more important as an author. Do you want to emphasize the rain, or do you want to emphasize the dim-eyed soul shuffling about? And that's an authorial decision to make. Which one do you want? Because they're both positions of emphasis.
I completely agree. I would just say that because the author is using I, assuming that this entire story is going to be from first person perspective, we really should have it on I, on the main character. So that's what I would put down.
Okay.
Is there anyone else who is brave enough? Maybe you don't even have to submit your own if you want, but maybe if you had something from maybe a novel or a short story of somebody else's that you thought, is this good, and you want to submit that for critique.
Well, I'm just going to read off one that I'm quoting from Leslie Livingston, her novel Dark Light, and I thought it was a brilliant opening line. So I want to share it with people. The old man lay crumpled on the flagstones in front of a Park Avenue brownstone, his lifeblood oozing from 5 small holes in his neatly buttoned tweed vest, like sap from a maple tree tapped in the spring.
That's vivid.
That's vivid. And, you have a character immediately to lock onto, the old man. And the questions, why is he laying there? It's placing the scene, Park Avenue brownstone. So you're in New York. And I thought that was one of the best opening lines for the work that it does that I've come across.
So
Plus, Leslie is a sweetheart. So.
Before we get to the next one that has been generously posted by Daniel, I just looked up the worst opening lines in a novel. I'll just read a couple short ones. So here are the worst opening lines. It began oddly. That's it. Rumors are the begetters of gossip. So here's one relating to our sitting down in a car. The cabin passenger wrote in his diary a parody of Descartes, I feel discomfort, therefore I am alive, then sat pen in hand with no more to record. I'll do, let's see, one more. Oh, this is brilliant. It was like so, but wasn't. Oh, one last one. Indian summer is like a woman. That really says it all. All right. enough of that. So we got another lot.
Oh,
you
we've got
wanna-
two more. Okay.
Got-
I'll read the next one from Daniel. No man in the fifth would refuse the honor of being a color guard, but few were eager to go into battle with even less of a chance of coming out alive.
That's good.
It's good. What I would say is right off the bat, remove other because it qualifies it, and even less chance of coming out alive still carries the emotion better. It's a little harder hitting. But let me make the point. If that's all I'm finding wrong with something, you've done really well.
Yeah, if we critique, I mean, I just come from my perspective, having just finished a dissertation last year, and here, like I'm a published academic, and yet every time you turn in something to a doctor of your field, pretty much every single word will be covered in red. And this is not just my experience, this is my colleagues too. So if we critique your stuff, don't think that we're being mean-spirited. Like, as authors, like, this is literally our job. So we're not being mean for the sake of being mean. It's not that early.
Okay. Daniel wants to know, what did you say to remove? I think you said it was of even
Yeah.
less. It should be even less chance
Of
rather than
coming out
less.
alive.
Yeah.
I just have one little comment. It's just stylistic. Fifth, would you might be a good idea to spell it out instead of put the number. It's just a little more authorial. There'll be a little more flow that way. Numbers tend to kind of staccato people's writing. But at the end of the day, that's your choice too, with your style and your tone. It's really good.
Yeah.
Though. It's really active.
No. I understand with the number. Yeah, like I said, this is the draft, and
Okay.
that's the way I wrote it because it's a military, an army regiment. So fifth is there because a lot of times numbers, but
Okay.
no, that's fine. And so okay, thanks, Stephen.
I'm not I'm not big in the military, but doesn't every numbered regiment or company or whatever have they have their own nickname or title? So for example, the 101st Airborne, which is super famous, they called themselves Easy Company. So instead of saying the fifth, maybe if you had something, if they had an actual name, that could stick out more.
Yeah, in Civil War, some regiments did, some didn't. Like, for example, this is a Civil War story. So there was the Iron Brigade, which was
there you go. Yeah,
a brigade from Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, Michigan, like the upper Midwest. And so there are several Iron Brigades that were around, but this one is just the fifth. But some of the companies that I have in the story do have nicknames. But this one we just call the fifth.
And I would add, if you're going to write out the number as a name of the brigade, it should be capitalized.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay.
Natasha, are we moving on? Do you want to read the next one, Natasha?
From Caitlin.
So Mary did not like tea, nor did she like it any better with sugar or milk, but she drank tea with sugar and milk because society expected civilized ladies to drink tea and to not throw the cup at anyone who suggested she try it with milk or sugar, as if she should consider the suggestion a revelation.
I find it a little long.
Yeah. What I would suggest, Mary did not like tea, full stop. She drank tea with sugar and milk because society expected civilized ladies to drink it and not throw the cup to anyone who suggested they try it with milk or sugar, as if this was a revelation. Same content, but you've cut your word count and you've tightened it up.
Yeah.
So remove the repetitive elements. overall, it's a nice start. It's a nice start, just needs a little bit of tightening.
Yeah, it tells you a lot about Mary and kind of the pressure she's under, and also, you know, her resistance to it. So I find it cool that you really get a sense of who she is and what world she's in immediately. Kind of like Steven said, it can be tightened. That's stuff that can come with editing, of course. I'm sure as you reread it, you'll figure out other ways to phrase it, but it's a strong start.
One thing is, yeah, so I like the expectations that it brings with it. One thing is try to use as many proper nouns rather than just nouns by themselves. So for example, instead of saying because society expected civilized ladies, you could say because Victorian society. So now we instantly know, like, okay, this is taking place in Britain, this is taking place during a certain time. Another thing is expected civilized ladies. I mean, you could go with that. If you wanted to do something like expected, what's the phrase? Like proper wives, for example. So now we know that, oh, okay, she's a wife. So, you know, you can, I think there's a lot of nouns there which you can make more specific. I think there's as we're still recovering from the appearance of that cat, there's a comment, and I don't know if this comment is either meant to be about this panel or is it an opening line, but it says, I don't know why I was drawn to such a dreary place. So, welcome.
Pretty sure it's an opening line.
Okay.
Well, the fact that we felt how brutal that would have been had it been a comment on the panel shows you it's quite a powerful opening line. You do get the sentiment across well.
No, I like it. That's a good one. And it's nice and simple. It's kind of Hemingway-esque that it's a very short one, which leads into the next sentence. I mean, if that's the style that you're using, then that's great, because you know, I'd like to know what your next sentence is, because then, you know, you add more detail to it. But yeah, that's a great opening line.
You know, and as Stephen said, the first line sells the paragraph, and the paragraph sells the page. So yeah, that's the bestseller, that one there. Okay.
Yeah, I'll toss out another great line from a very good friend of mine, Ira Neiman, in his book Random Dingoes. The very first line, do you mind?
All right, if you're going to throw out good lines, I'm going to throw out a bad line. In this dream, where he was weightless and unalive, where he was a pervading mist of consciousness that seethed and trembled in a vast stretch of dark, there was at first no feeling, only a dim sort of appreciation, eyeless, brainless, and remote, where singular ability was to differentiate between himself and the darkness. And this is one sentence, by the way.
Was that a Bulwer-Lytton winner, that one? Is that where you're getting these?
This is from the American Scholar. That was John Edward Williams, Nothing But the Night. So everybody put that on your read list. I personally don't think we've topped, what is it? Indian Summer is Like a Woman. Held it all.
Yeah. I don't know if it's still out, but there used to be a collection of the worst first lines that was published every year. And it was actually worth reading because they were so bad, they were good. You know?
Yeah, there's something to be said about that. You can learn a lot from, you know, even if it's not necessarily a bad novel or a bad writing, there is something so instructive about people who don't quite have it. You know, they may even have a good idea, but it just doesn't come out very often. I think that's sort of the big thing for a lot of writers. I think a lot of you know, wannabe writers, they have a really good idea, but they just don't quite know how to communicate it. So does anyone have any particular advice? I know this has been like the main theme of the panel, but I have a feeling that everyone here that is part of this panel probably has some story which could be really great. I mean, let's be honest, like a great author can take the most boring situation possible and make it really enticing. Does anyone have anything more to say on how you can take maybe something that's even kind of banal and make it really, really enticing?
Best advice I can give anybody about opening lines is look at the books on your shelves
Oh, that's a good
and
one.
look at the ones that really grabbed you right off. Look at those opening lines, steal the structure. Good authors steal from other authors. Bad authors borrow, because when you steal something, you make it your own. So yeah, learn from those you consider great.
One of my favorite authors, because I learned so much from reading her book, was Erin Morgenstern, The Night Circus. And I really recommend that book. To me, it was a master class in writing with a light touch. A problem I've always had, because I guess I'm an English teacher, so I've been obsessed with grammar and spelling and punctuation for so long. And when you are describing, you really have to have a light touch in your prose. The Night Circus is one that I really recommend. Does anybody else on the panel have a book to recommend?
Well, I'm going to recommend the book that has my favorite opening line ever. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of good fortune must be in want of a wife. Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah,
That
one
is
of the classics.
Yeah, like you can never go wrong with the classics. I find that opening line just tells you so much in such a concise way. It's really powerful. And it also shows, you know, just kind of Jane Austen's tone. On one hand, she writes with a lot of authority, but there's always a little bit of humor in there too. It's just so well done. And also, I like that opening line that you shared, Cricket, especially the last part, because at first you think, okay, it's kind of slow. He's wandering into a library reading about law, kind of boring, and which has caused me some trouble recently. Oh, it's like.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I think you cut out the. Oh no, Natasha has been frozen in time. Oh, she's back. Okay, good. So I'll share one since we're all sharing. So okay. So I was rapidly looking at books. So there are a couple good ones. I think 1984's opening. It was like mid-April, and the clocks were striking 13. So there are some really good ones. This is going to be a bit cheating, but one thing that really this is for a podcast. What podcasts can often be like a narrative, not necessarily a novel. But after Mike Duncan did the History of Rome, which is this giant, super podcast, then this other guy, Robin Pierce, did the History of Byzantium. And the way he started it was by saying that Rome began as a city and ended as an empire, but Byzantium began as an empire and ended as a city. And I thought, wow, what a way to draw people in. And it's especially those contradictions, whether it's something like that or whether it's Dickens saying that, it was the best of times, worst of times, or now in my own novel where, unseen tears stream down the puffy cheeks beneath the 15-year-old's veil. Here you have someone who's preparing for their wedding and yet they're crying because of it. So if you can give people contradictions like that, I think that works well. Kind of to tie into this line which you shared, cricket, because here you have something which seems kind of mundane. In fact, even the verb is mundane. I wandered into a library, so there's not even a rush or that sort of thing. You know, to do a quick reading on the law, which has caused me some trouble recently. So here you have someone who seems very much at ease with the fact that they're kind of screwed. You know, I really like that opening.
Yeah. Okay, we've only got about 4 minutes left. So do people want to do a wrap up?
Yeah, okay. Any final, final thought? I just want to thank everybody who was so attentive, and thank you for your wonderful contributions of opening lines for us to consider. And I'm going to hand it off to the rest of the panel to give their final thoughts. Gary, would you start, please?
Do me last. I gotta gather my thoughts.
Okay, all right, I'll go the other direction. Natasha.
Sure. Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for participating so actively. I loved getting the chance to read your lines. You guys are all really talented. I guess my big takeaway on this would be, simple works, just make it active, make it interesting, whether that's through contradiction or through subversion, or just by having a compelling image. Simple always works. Active, engaging, and yeah.
Okay, Stephen.
I'd agree with Natasha. Simple, active, engaging. It's okay to start with an archetype so that you don't have to do a whole lot of characterization right at the beginning, but to move beyond the archetype within the first couple of paragraphs and make them something unique. So the whole idea is grab. And if you can pass it to somebody that they can read it over and say, yes, I want to read the rest of this, you probably got it.
Terrific, thank you. Now, Gary?
Think about emotion. Set the emotional tone. You can also set the themes there, whether or not this is the overwhelming conflict. As Stephen noted with James Bond's opening missions usually have nothing to do with the main movie, but it's that sort of action, whether it's the sort of goofy, super suave Bond that you see in Pierce Brosnan, or whether it's sort of the gritty James Bond you see in Daniel Craig. That opening scene tells you this is what the movie is going to be like. So use your opening line, even if it's not the main conflict, to show what you are going to do in the rest of the novel.
And I'm just going to finish off with show, don't tell. That is really good advice. And thank you, everyone,